Hello and welcome to another OLLO Chat episode. This is episode number 5. In this one, we'll talk about guitar production with two amazing guests. Leo Abrahams, all the way from London, a guy who's been working with great names from Paolo Nutini on, and he'll explain more in details. And also Enrico Sesselego from Italy, who's been working with the guitar gods, Steve Vai, Paul Gilbert. And I'm very excited to dive into guitar productions. We'll see where this takes us. So guys, hello and welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for asking us to join.
Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. Would you mind do like a short 1-2 sentence introductions of yourself so I don't mess things up? Leo, maybe you can start.
I'm a guitar player and a producer from London, and I always thought that at a certain point I'd sort of transition from guitar to production all the time, but I'm glad to say that I still have that mixture of things in my career, and I enjoy them both equally. And yeah, it's been my pleasure to work with some great artists over the years, and still learning and excited to hopefully pick up some tips myself about guitar recording.
Beautiful. Enrico, what's your story?
All right, actually, it's very similar to the one Leo because I'm very in love with guitar still. I mean, I've been playing all my life, but I mostly went into the recording and mixing engineering. That's why I get most of my living income from. I do a lot of seminars, Japan, India, South America and stuff for like mixing and producing. But I'm a guitar player and I try to play as much as possible and get involved in projects. So it's good that we are two people that are at the same, same kind of love for the instrument, So it's good.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's what I guess that makes this episode a little bit special in a way. So I'll dive into the first question that it's something that's close to me, to my home as well. The sound of a guitar, right? It's a big debate every time. How does your guitar sound? What do you use? What strings? What amps, etc. A lot about the gear, then a lot about the chords being used and how you play, etc. So how much of the sound does come from a player, and how much does it come from the gear? Enrico, maybe you can start on that one.
Okay, sure. I think everybody agrees that the sounds. I mean, there is a big saying that you can have a very piece of crap guitar and give it to somebody random and it sounds like a crap. You give to guitar god, it sounds great. So of course the player makes the difference. I mean, that's a logical choice. But it's a combination of everything because you can also be a great player but not having enough the gear, the chance to express yourself because you have a poor recording. Just the basic poor recording with the poor level just already kills the vibe. So without even talking about gear and stuff.
Exactly.
Sorry.
So that's what I want to ask Leah now, right? So sure, the player does a lot of things, but there's also what the player plays. Right? There's a song that was made. There's maybe a solo part that was designed, put together, produced in a way. So how much of that overall quality of a song, of a sound, etc., comes down to producing the right notes in the right way, Leo?
Well, it's going to get philosophical really quickly, but all of this happens within the context, of course, of music. And there's a cliche about guitar players that they just want to sort of shred over everything, but it hasn't really been my experience, not just me personally, but fortunately most of the people I work with, is that they're interested in music and the guitar is their vehicle to make that music. And going back to whether a guitar is crappy or very good quality or whatever, it's kind of about the relationship that you have with that instrument as a musician in whatever context you're in. So for sure, you can have a challenging instrument even, but make something great with it. Or you can hand a 57 Les Paul to someone who doesn't have the sensitivity, and it's not going to sound very good. But for sure, one of the nice things about producing younger bands is that they're excited. I'm sure you have the same experience. They're excited to see your gear, you know, and there's definitely a difference between, you know, the guys copy guitar and the real thing, for example. There is an audible difference, but it also, I think, the guy might be more inspired when he's playing the vintage instrument. Who knows? But yeah, it's all related.
You did mention relationship with music, right? So maybe we can touch on that. What does that mean, relationship with music? What does that entail? What do you mean when you say it depends on your relationship with music? Leo, maybe.
Me? Well, there's a sort of conversation going on between what you're hearing and what's in your head or in your heart, and then your hands. That's it, really. And I think one of the jobs of the producer is to try and make the environment as comfortable as possible for the musicians, so that they can hear what they're doing, they don't feel self-conscious, and everything, the whole technical process is as transparent and frictionless as possible. Because in general, I think people perform better when they're more relaxed.
Absolutely. But I do maybe see this going two ways. So one side would be this kind of like emotional relationship, what you feel, what's in your heart. But there's also this technical relationship. When I say that, I mean more like, what is your attitude towards instruments? What is your attitude toward other instruments playing, other musicians, etc.? So it's not just a relationship with music that lives inside of you, but it's also a relationship with, well, people and the technology that is available to you as a tool, a creative tool. Enrico, what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, and I agree with Leo at the same time. It's you have to be on my point of view. You need to know what's going on the other instruments, because you are there to help other people to express the better. So, for example, I am a guitar player and I love guitar, but I also love drums. So I can definitely rely very well with drummers. But it's been a time in my life that I've been very involved with the horn sections, stuff like that for my work. So I really wanted to, I interview some friends of mine who play trumpet or plays trombone, and ask them about the physics and the way they play, the way to express, what they can do, what is the emotional, also because there's all the breathing involved, of course, over there. So, and I think all of that is in the process, because you definitely need to make them comfortable, that's for sure. You're a stranger for your client, most of all. So this is the first step. Then you need to know what's going on their world. And of course, you need to cope with all the technical issues behind that. I mean, that's something they don't have to know, but you have to know. I don't know if I answer right, but there is it's very long, from the music to the emotional situation, but also to the technical and the physical aspect of the instrument and the technique involved, for sure. That's always something that I always have to cope with.
I agree completely. There is, though, an interesting thing that you mentioned, or kind of mentioned, the trust between the artist and the technician, right? You said you need to know physical things, math at some point, right? You can calculate things. You need to know signal processing, a lot of things. So how do you build trust over the years? And then on the flip side, how do you build trust when you have a stranger? Like you said, most of the times, you are the stranger to your clients. They maybe meet you for the first time. So how do you make this bridge of making them trust you that whatever cab you decide to use or whatever mic you decide to use is the right one, the right choice, without second guessing you, Enrico?
I started from the point that it's a common saying that music, it's a people's world. So again, it's a combination between you being polite, open, kind, but also very prepared. I mean, people love to see, they love to notice that you are prepared, that you know what you're talking about. So I'm not the one that always put myself in the front. I'm not the kind of guy. But when I'm in studio and I I have my guest doing the recording, the studio, whatever I am, whenever I am. But I always, whatever and whenever I am, I always put them in the condition to understand that I really can help them because I know what they're talking about. I know what we're gonna do. I actually make sure they know what I'm going to do and the process. Because people, some musicians at some point, they kind of get lost between recording and mixing and all this process and how it is gonna go in steps and everything. And sometimes already just make them clear about the process, what it's gonna be, what it's gonna be like, what we're gonna do, and everything. It builds a trust, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I would say so actually.
So, Leah, there was a magic word in Enrico's answer, which was preparation. Right. So there's a lot you need to prepare for anything. Usually, they say the success of a project comes to 80% preparation, 20% execution, right? As a stereotype, but I mean, I guess it's kind of true. It definitely rings true inside OLLO walls. So I'm wondering, for you, Leah, when you approach, you mentioned earlier before we went live that you have your own productions, your own songs. How do you prepare for those kind of production versus working with somebody else? Is there a different preparation process?
That's an enormous question. But I think the hard thing about working alone is that part of self-production is not being too hard on yourself when it's not going well. But in a way, your whole life is a preparation for whatever moment. I mean, the thing that I've really learned from the greatest people I've worked with, whether they're guitar players or not, is to have 100% commitment to the sound that you're making at all times. I don't think there should be any kind of joking around. Even when if you want to play something jokey, then play it jokey with your entire heart. I think that when other people come into my space, or when I go into a space with another artist, there's usually goodwill there on both sides. It's a bit like giving a best man speech at a wedding. Like, people want you to succeed. I think you have to work quite hard to lose trust. And there's just kind of mutual sensitivity there within the room. And it's very different whether you're dealing with a multiple instrument setup, obviously, or a single instrument setup. For some reason, I assumed the focus of this was going to be concentrating a little bit more on guitar focused recordings, but the band thing is kind of a different kettle of fish entirely. So I'm quite happy to experiment when I'm on my own, but I'm also happy to experiment with other people, because I don't see the point of preparing unless you're then going to discover something further. So I mean, people watching this may or may not know that I spent a long time, in a way, a sort of a traineeship in some ways with Brian Eno. And the thing that really impressed me about him, and still does, is that he creates a safe environment for people to experiment. And I think that's the best thing you can give a musician, to say, there's no chance of fucking up here. Anything you do is valid, and I've got the technical side. Don't worry about that. You can explore. And when I'm working on my own, that's what I try and do for myself, is to let myself off the hook.
Okay, so maybe we can touch a little bit on obviously you guys are working with the highest order of professionals all over the world. Obviously our clients and guys listening to this will mostly be home producers or artists working from home, especially in the past few years. I think, the majority was kind of pushed into learning new tricks and stuff and all about the gear, etc. So do you think there is a entry trick or something that you can, basic setup that you can use with quite good results? So for example, me as a drummer, I do know that if I'm using SM57 on a snare, I'm kind of in the safe zone no matter what. Is there a similar situation with a guitar, something that anybody can use and get a decent result? Maybe Enrico and then Leo?
Okay, I'm coming from this rock area, no? I mean, 18 years ago, I used to work for Favorite Nation Labels, which is Steve Vai's personal label, besides Steve Vai. And it was about having Frank Gambale, having Chad Walkerman, having all these people. And the stuff was done absolutely in studio in an analog way. So of course, I mean, if you compare this to, I mean, this is the basic standard, and they always say for the guitar, and that's what I use when I can. I always use two microphones. You mentioned the SM57, which is like the Swiss knife for the microphones in general, and the 57 on the guitar were in amplifier, of course. Amplify guitar works great together with the 421. It's a common thing that I use in Steve Lukather for the Yardbirds track. Steve Vai uses, Joe Satriani uses the double mics or triple mics with the Royer M180. But and of course, this is not an entry stuff, because as you know, once you have microphones, you need to have some mic pre's, and then so we need to go up in price and everything. And I'm not really a nerd on that. I've never been. I mean, I have a camper on my own, a camper amplifier in my place, and when I go to Japan, I do work with a band called Baby Metal. Sometimes some of the Baby Metal musician is a huge band over there, and all the musicians, they use only camper, even in studio. So you see, it's like everybody said, the camper is good for live, but it's not good for studio. But also we're talking about the microphone. So you see something in the way in between. To finish up, so I can make it shorter, a starting setup would be I always say to people, look, you need to slowly, whenever you have the budget for, that's my best suggestion. Whenever you have budget for, just think ahead and think what you're gonna what you need to reach. You wanna reach your amplifier and get the amplifier recorded. So start with the mic, then you're gonna get possibly a good mic pre, of course. Before everything, a good sound interface for the conversion, and slowly you get there. I always say people just go in steps, because if you have a big budget, you can do everything you want, and that's self-explanatory. That's my point of view. I'm very technical. I'm very immediate on this, because there's no really right or wrong. It's like where you wanna go. You wanna have your amplifier at 9 turn up and record it like Eddie Van Halen. So get your mics, get your mic pre's, and slowly. Otherwise, camper, fractal, and all that can give you very decent effects, you know? Sorry, there we go.
So, Leo, do you have a similar opinion, or is there a setup that you are always kind of taking with you?
No, well,
What do you put in a backpack if you would need to go somewhere? What would you take with you?
well, before we go there, I have to say I'm totally fanning out here, because I really love so many of those records. And when I was a teenager, I was a huge Steve Vai fan. I think I went to go and see him when I was 15, ran to the front and managed to grab his velvet boot. And that was a very thrilling moment for me. And I used to learn his material, and it was just great. So it's really nice to meet you here, I have to say that. It's very similar to you. I use a 2-mic setup as my basic thing. It's a 57 and an M160 usually.
We've lost you for a second.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Am I back?
Yeah, getting there.
It seems to
I think
yeah.
it was,
Oh, okay.
yeah, we've lost you with the velvet boots.
The velvet boots. Well,
Yeah, exactly.
that was the important bit. So I'm glad that
That was fun.
I'm glad that got through. So anyway, about the gear, I'm very, very similar to you. I usually have a 2-mic setup as my starting point, a 57, and in my case an M160. And you can get kind of the body from one, brightness from the other one, and that's not beyond. I mean, that's a reasonable budget, actually. I think for a starting point, those 2 microphones, notwithstanding mic pre's, like you said. I mean, it's debatable even whether it's easy for a lot of people to record a cabinet at the correct volume in whatever setup they have. I mean, here in London, even rooms that you hire and pay for, you have to kind of keep the noise down, because often there's people next door renting their room and they don't want to hear a guitar cabinet at high volume. So what I was going to move on to say, somewhat controversially, in addition to the Kemper and that kind of gear, some of the amp simulators in the UA stuff is good. There's STL tones, who I think are associated with Kemper. That can be good. And of course, then what you end up with is a DI, which maybe later on, you might go to a big studio and reamp the DI. It's kind of flexible, and I have nothing against that. what I've personally found is that whereas they can sound very impressive on their own, the plug-in versions of amps, once you start to multi-track them, they kind of start to crush up a little bit, and that's where you hear their shortcomings. But for me personally, the best ones are STL tones. You can actually layer those up and it's convincing. Or mix and match. The Brainworks stuff is also very good. But I wouldn't rule that out. And then of course it depends what genre you're working in primarily. But when I'm working on my stuff, which is quite electronic or experimental, I use a lot of DI guitar with no amp simulator, because I want to capture some of that low, even sort of sub that can come off the string, and some of that very top end, which a guitar cabinet just smashes off, but which you can filter off and use for other stuff. So really obviously there are no rules. It depends what you're working on, but I certainly think there's no shame in using software amps, Kemper, whatever. You can have a great result with those things and work with that.
Absolutely. Oh, we do have a few minutes left. Maybe we can touch on acoustic guitars. I do have like a little bit of experience. Again, I'm a total amateur, but it's a completely different approach. And maybe you guys can share something with the community when you are recording the acoustic guitar. What would be like the 2 or 3 main things that you need to sort out before you even attempt that? Maybe Enrico, you can start, and also I would like to hear from you, Leo, as well.
Okay. Look, I usually go on my standard setup. I mean, standard setup because I try it, I learn it on my own, and then I use it all the time. And which is actually, I mean, usually the safe microphone will be a condenser microphone, like a pencil one, a small diaphragm in front of the 12th fret. That's a standard thing. That gives you the string, gives you the sizzle and everything. I love the player perspective, which is the microphone condenser. Just you put it behind you, and it goes like this and face the guitar, which is right here, no? And you face the guitar, and I love that one because putting in the front can be difficult with the hands moving, and the guitar is kind of reacts very, very differently depending where you are. Also, if I have a chance to have a third mic, if I have a good room, or at least I can get 1 or 2 meters in front of me. So because acoustic instruments tend to rebuild all the waves a little bit in front, and that's something always we use. The very last thing, if the guitar has a DI jack, I usually track this one as a safe net in case I need something that I got lost somewhere, and they can be used for some mixes. Maybe I use also a little bit of the DI signal, to be honest. Here we go. Very short.
Beautiful. And Leo, how do you approach acoustics?
Well, very similar. I don't know if I could put it better. The only thing that I would add is that a simple but reliable method is the crosspair in front of the crosspair of small diaphragm condensers in front of the 12th fret, or wherever you find the sweet spot to be. Also, sometimes mid-side. A friend of mine, an engineer at Air Studios, has this interesting setup where he has the mid-side to the lower side of the sound hole, and then another omni in front of the 12th fret. And it's that is the most beautiful guitar sound I've ever played with. It's so natural and yet not kind of intimidating. Like sometimes even I've been doing this for a long time, but some acoustic guitar sounds, it makes you afraid to like shift in your seat even. And this is an excellent technique, but it's quite hard to replicate. You need a good sounding room, as you said. So yeah, once again, we are in agreement.
Beautiful. So there is a little thing that I just kind of sparkled in my mind, which is when well, 2 things. One is if you're using multiple mics, then you have these phase issues and stuff like that. So I'm wondering how to approach that. And secondly, usually you would have some sort of a click track or something that the player would require. So how do you mix that, make sure that the player feels right, that hear the guitar in a natural way, but at the same time still have a decent playback without leaking out, especially with maybe even nylon strings, which is even quieter probably. So how do you approach this kind of thing, Leo?
Well, carefully. I mean, you started off by talking about the phase thing. I think if you're in doubt about that, you shouldn't be doing it if there's another person there. It's fine to have a go on your own, and I take longer over my own acoustic guitar sounds because I can be patient with myself. I mean, about the click bleed, I can't say I run into that problem too much. I think it's good to encourage musicians to have sensible monitoring levels and the right kind of click, the right kind of headphones, closed back headphones. And I mean, if you have your headphones too loud, all that really and you might know this as a drummer, all that really happens after a certain SPL level is you just get the anxiety response, so it shouldn't be that loud. And I've had it recording string quartets that because there's 4 people in maybe crappy headphones and you can hear the click track, I just use the isotope software to get rid of it. I mean, obviously, nobody tracks anything planning to use isotope, but it can get you out of a fix. But more generally, it's about good quality headphones, the right click, and encouraging the player to have a sensible balance. But what do you think, Enrico?
I actually absolutely agree with you, and but on the other hand, as sometimes happens, especially if you have, for example, a recording for a pop-up project, you really need the guitar player. Of course, you can always add it. We didn't say that, but okay. You always have to have the player kind of really tight on the timing. So sometimes you need to give them a little extra click track because they need it and they want it. Of course, like you said, it's the tone. You can select, or now you can select the tone. I usually use something very bassy and not really pitchy because that's stuff that always goes out, especially with a microphone with a player perspective. That's a hell. So what I do, for example, I tell you what I do when I have this, I put, usually if they can play with this, I usually put the click on the other side, so on the left side, in my case. And also sometimes I ask them to bring them their earphone, so they're gonna put the earphone behind underneath the big phones, and I only send the click to the earphones so it can really go in. They need less volume, and also you have the big ones where they can hear the guitar, which protects as an extra muffle for the click to breathe. You know what I mean? So they have 2 sets of headphones. One earphones, really inner with the click, and the extra ones, and on the left side. And for the phase, the last time, like Leo was saying, of course you need to be sure what you're doing. You can always check, but I mean, checking is not always as a great experience. I mean, it's not that easy. And also, when you phase invert, you know better than me, then you phase invert 180. So it's not that you fix the problem unless there's something not really there. So you really need to be careful. To be honest, with this technique, you are pretty sure there is no phase problem, most likely.
Well, the player will maybe move a little bit as well, but there is an interesting experience, my own experience. Again, I'm an amateur in this, but like little buttons and stuff that you have maybe on your shirt, or if you have like a bracelet or stuff that. I think these things can turn out to be a problem later on. Maybe you don't even notice them at the start. So is this something that you guys are very peculiar about? Do you notice it up front? What's your experience?
If I start, no watches, no bracelets. I always put tape on the chair, and I make sure that the chair is no squeaky and stuff, because chairs can be very tricky. Especially if you do recording for a solo artist. If you do just guitar tracking, you're just gonna hear the strumming inside the big pop stuff. It's not really there. I mean, bracelet, yes, but the squeaky chair, yes, all of that, absolutely. What about you, Leo?
Yeah, the squeaky chair, that's the worst of all. It's also bad on piano, but yeah, it's like before you record acoustic guitar, it's like at the airport. You have to put everything in the tray and then get it down there. But Yeah, I think actually the thing that I come up against when I'm recording myself on acoustic is jeans, or like the guitar, hearing the guitar move against your trousers. That is a killer. So I actually have a special cloth that doesn't make much sound that I bring to certain sessions, especially when it's very quiet. Sometimes people want you to play ultra quiet and they want to hear all the finger noise and intimacy, and then yeah, you can get in trouble. Also, I have a slightly wonky nose, so I have to remember to breathe through my mouth because breathing, that's another one.
Yeah.
Killer. It's a very, I know. Oh, that's bad. Yeah.
Acoustic guitars are kind of a little bit more tricky to get it right.
They are tricky. They are tricky because to get it clean. They are tricky. They are tricky, and on top of that, there is the performance. So everything. I mean, the player has to be very careful with the noises, and he has to be aware of that, and they has to play well, which is not really. It's not really switching life from day to night.
And then play it emotionally, play it passionately, but don't
Yeah.
don't make too much sounds. Yeah, absolutely.
All these degrees,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Leo, Enrico, thank you very much for joining in this episode. It was a blast for me. I think we could talk like for hours about this. We do have a limit here. So this one is, as always, sponsored with Headliner Magazine UK, distributed over YouTube, Spotify, etc. So you guys can catch it there. And just to let know our listeners know, so we do have a YouTube channel, so you can watch us talk about this as well as listen to us, and you're welcome to join and check the previous episodes where we were talking about Dolby Atmos, for example, and headphones in general. We do make headphones, by the way. We didn't talk much about headphones. We are a headphone manufacturer, having Leo and Enrico talk about guitars, which is wonderful. So anyway, to wrap this up, thank you again, Leo and Enrico, and I hope that we can pick it up again at some time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.